Alright, so this is the ICS Temporal Navigation and Galactic Affairs Division. We're going over retrograde pressure map and predictive theses for Solarian noospheric stability, Q1 2026 through Q3 2027. We look at our executive summary, which is going over quite a bit. So this brief presents a temporal pressure map for Earth's Solarian noosphere for the period February 11th, 2026 through August 11th, 2027. Analysis indicates a critical 18-month compression and release sequence defined by overlapping retrograde cycles of Pluto, Saturn, Neptune, and a pivotal Mars retrograde in late 2026. This period will pressure humanity's collective shadow material, Pluto in Aquarius, test structural reform, Saturn in Aries, and force a crisis of collective vision, Neptune in Aries. This convergence peaks in Q4 2026, presenting a high probability window for either a noospheric breakthrough into coherent group consciousness or a catastrophic regression into tribal fragmentation. Our predictive thesis posits this as the first great filter test for unguided Solarian consciousness since the Great Simplification. Strategic diplomatic readiness is recommended. Let's look at our methodology and temporal frameworks. This analysis employs the following ICS proprietary models: resonant temporal field RTF modeling, mapping planetary retrograde stations as pressure waves within the collective consciousness medium, synchronicity engine protocols harmonizing Vimshottari Dasha sequences, Earth's collective chart with Western progressed and retrograde cycles, exoplanetary analog referencing, utilizing archetypal data from observed systems with similar outer planet configurations. For example, Kepler 452b's Crisis of Ethos period. Synthesize archetypal language, SAL. All predictions are derived from universal archetypal principles, not culturally bound symbolism. Let's look at the retrograde pressure map. Our core cycles and synthesis. The following map visualizes the major retrograde periods and their overlap, creating zones of escalating noospheric tension. Okay, so this is our period in our key retrograde cycles. So there's a timeline here showing overlapping bars for each planet's retrograde period. We can visualize. So Pluto retrograde in Aquarius. These specific dates, May 1st, 2026 through October 10th of 2026. Core pressure is internal review of collective power structures, technology ethics, and revolutionary ideals. Next, we have Saturn retrograde in Aries from June 29th through November 15th of 2026, and the core pressure is reevaluation of new initiatives, disciplinary actions, and the architecture of conflict. And we have Neptune retrograde in Aries, July 7th, 2026 through December 12th. Core pressure, confusion, disillusionment with new ideologies, fog of war, literal and metaphysical. We have Mars retrograde, Cancer to Leo, December 2026 through February 2027. It's our critical inflection point, with our core pressure being internalized rage over security, tribal issues being Cancer, erupting into performative, ego-driven conflict being Leo. Now we look at our synthesis of overlap, the compression chamber. Our peak pressure window is June through November of 2026. We have Pluto, Saturn, and Neptune, all retrograde concurrently. This creates a cosmic echo chamber where structural flaws in new systems, Saturn retrograde in Aries, are exposed by hidden power dynamics, Pluto retrograde in Aquarius, all while the inspiring narrative behind them dissolves, Neptune retrograde in Aries. Our SAL translation, the principle of structures, Saturn, and the principle of dissolution, Neptune, in the domain of the pioneer, Aries, under internal review by the principle of transformative power, Pluto, in the domain of the collective, Aquarius. Our trigger point, It's December 2026 through February 2027. The Mars retrograde acts as the release valve for this compressed pressure. How the preceding compression chamber is processed will determine if Mars retrograde manifests as civilizational courage, high probability collapse, or civilizational temper tantrum, low probability collapse. Now we look at our predictive theses, scenarios, and nospheric trajectories. Based on RTF modeling and exoplanetary analogs, we project two primary scenario branches with a 72% probability of branching at the Mars retrograde inflection point. Our first scenario alpha, 55% probability of the forged alliance. We have our pathway. The Q3 through Q4 2026 compression chamber forces painful but necessary disclosures and systemic corrections, a major geopolitical or ecological crisis likely tied to Saturn, Neptune, and Aries, failed unilateral action, ecological misstep. In late September 2026 becomes a unifying sacrifice. Mars retrograde manifestation. Collective action, Mars is redirected inward, retrograde, towards healing tribal wounds, Cancer, and is subsequently channeled into coordinated dramatic humanitarian or exploratory projects, Leo, by Q2 2027. We have our outcome. The noosphere develops increased coherence bandwidth, demonstrating a newfound capacity to hold complex tension without fragmentation. This readiness elevates the probability of successful low-trauma interaction with Grade 1 observer non-human intelligences by late 2027. We have our exoplanetary analog, mirrors the Kethic alignment of Proxima Centauri b, where a resource crisis during a similar retrograde cluster led to the emergence of a planetary stewardship ethos. Our scenario beta, 45% probability, the fractured mirror. Again, we have our pathway. The pressures of 2026 are met with increased denial, blame, and systemic lockdown. Pluto in Aquarius exposes power abuses in technology or governance, but Saturn in Aries responds with authoritarian crackdowns, and Neptune in Aries fuels conspiratorial us versus them narratives. Mars retrograde manifestation. Frustration erupts as hot conflict within familial, ethnic, national lines, Cancer, escalating into theatrical, ego-driven displays of defiance, Leo, potentially new, fragmented international conflicts or civil unrest. Outcome. The noosphere's entropy index rises significantly, coherence is lost, delaying potential contact readiness by 12 to 18 Earth years, and requiring GIC-backed noospheric stabilization protocols. And we have our exoplanetary analog, reflects the silent divide period of Tau Cetu, where a failure to integrate shadow material during a Plutonian review led to a millennia-long planetary stasis. Our critical fixed star and exoplanetary resonances. Pluto's retrograde station is May 1st, 2026, occurs under the fixed star Sheet, 29 degrees Aquarius. Historically, this correlates with ideological martyrdom and mass watery events. Expect the crises related to information floods, network collapses, or maritime disasters that catalyzes the retrograde's internal review. So our Mars retrograde station, December 4th, 2026, aligns with Kepler 1649c's sundering archetype in our exoplanetary analog database. This marks a high probability point for the rupture of a major previously stable alliance or trade partnership. Our strategic recommendations for the Galactic Interface Council: increase observer presence in cislunar space, Q2 2026 onwards, monitor noospheric resonance fields for signs of coherence collapse or unexpected harmonic leaps during the peak pressure window, prepare for stage contact protocols for scenario alpha. If noospheric coherence metrics improve through Q1 2027, a low eruption observational reveal, for example controlled UAP display in neutral airspace, could be strategically deployed to reinforce unity and awe, cementing the positive trajectory. Develop noospheric stabilization packages for scenario beta. Should entropy spike during Mars retrograde, have resonant field dampening protocols derived from Kappa Reticuli, harmonic neutralization tech, ready for deployment via allied human channels to prevent irreversible fragmentation. Liaise with ICS Diplomatic Corps, authorized proactive behind-the-scenes engagement with key human cultural and technological figures during the September through October 2026 revelation window to gently guide narrative integration towards scenario alpha. Our conclusion. The upcoming 18-month period represents the most significant astro-temporal pressure test for Solarian consciousness since the 2020 conjunction cluster. The retrograde pressure map does not dictate fate but illuminates the probable stress factors and evolutionary potentials within the Earth noosphere. By understanding this temporal terrain, the Galactic Interface Council can shift from passive observation to conscious stewardship, fulfilling its mandate to guide emerging consciousness through its first great galactic threshold. Time is not a river to be watched. It is an ocean to be navigated, and we are the navigators. Now, next video, we're going to look at the Saturn IX refit, a historiography of global structural revision, 2040 through 2045, through the lens of Saturn retrograde in Aquarius. Again, by the ICS, and this time the Department of Historical Cartography, as a midterm paper example. Hope to see you there. Subscribe, like, and comment.